Thus, although the tendency for philosophical speculation exists, the material effects of fruitive activities and empiric speculation do not, because this activity is meant for the supreme personality of Godhead. Okay, so sometimes it looks like a devotee is engaged in mundane activities, but actually, that's not the fact. That although the activities seem to be mundane, the results of the activity of the devotee is that he offers everything to Krishna. Okay, so uh, there's a reference here of two diseases which are due to material contamination. And what are they? Okay, so uh, it says the karmis try to utilize the resources of material nature and thus become its lord and enjoy sense gratification. And the jnanis, the salvationists who have become frustrated in enjoying the material resources, want to become one with the Supreme Personality of Godhead or merge into the impersonal effulgence. These two diseases are due to material contamination. Material contamination can be consumed by devotional service because in devotional service, these two diseases, namely the desire to lord it over material nature and the desire to become one with the Supreme Lord, are absent. Therefore, the cause of material existence is at once consumed by the careful discharge of devotional service in Krishna consciousness. Okay. And then continuing, it says, a devotee in full Krishna consciousness appears superficially to be a great karmi, always working, but the inner significance of the devotee's activities is that they are meant for the satisfaction of the Supreme Lord. This is called bhakti or devotional service. Arjuna was apparently a fighter, but when by his fighting he satisfied the senses of Lord Krishna, he became a devotee. Since a devotee also engages in philosophical research to understand the Supreme Person as he is, his activities may thus appear to be like those of a mental speculator, but actually, he is trying to understand the spiritual nature and transcendental activities. Thus, although the tendency for philosophical speculation exists, the material effects of fruitive activities and empiric speculation do not, because this activity is meant for the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Okay, so this verse, Canto 3, chapter 27, text 23. And what does it say? Just to repeat again, the influence of material nature has covered the living entity, and thus it is as if the living entity were always in a blazing fire. But by the process of seriously discharging devotional service, this influence can be removed, just as wooden sticks which cause a fire are themselves consumed by it. Okay, so let's read what that means. Just as wooden sticks which cause a fire are themselves consumed by it. Uh, and it explains that in the beginning of this purport. It says, fire is conserved in wooden sticks. Okay, so wooden sticks have the potential of fire. And when circumstances are favorable, the fire is ignited. But the wooden sticks, which are the cause of the fire, are also consumed by the fire if it is properly dealt with. Similarly, the living entity's conditional life of material existence is due to his desire to lord it over material nature and due to his envy of the Supreme Lord. Okay, so thus his main diseases are that he wants to be one with the Supreme Lord or he wants to become the Lord of material nature. The karmis try to utilize the resources of material nature and thus become its Lord and enjoy sense gratification. And the Gyanis, the salvationists, who have become frustrated in enjoying the material resources, want to become one with the Supreme Personality of Godhead or merge into the impersonal effulgence. These two diseases are due to material contamination. Well, what should we really want to do? We should really want to be the eternal servants of Krishna. We shouldn't want to merge into Krishna. We shouldn't want to uh, become superior to Krishna. We should want to serve Krishna with love and devotion. So this merging, this urging for merging, should be given up. That's what the my bodies want to do. They're urging for merging into the Brahman effulgence, and others they're desiring to emulate Krishna, to become like God. So, therefore, these two diseases are due to material contamination. So, what are they? The karmis try to utilize the resources of material nature and thus become its lord and enjoy sense gratification. Okay, that's the karmis. And the jnanis, the salvationists who have become frustrated in enjoying the material resources, want to become one with the Supreme Personality Godhead or merge into the impersonal effulgence. That's two. So these two diseases are due to material contamination. Well, okay. Well, what do the devotees want? They don't want to merge into the Brahmajyoti. They don't want to become God. They want to be servants of the Lord. So they engage in devotional service. Whereas these other persons, they have these very strong material desires to be the owner, the controller, and the basically the supreme personality of Godhead. So, uh, material contamination can be consumed by devotional service. Okay, in other words, material contamination can be purified. Here he used the word consumed, but it means purified by devotional service because in devotional service, these two diseases, namely the desire to lord it over material nature and the desire to become one with the Supreme Lord, are absent. Therefore, the cause of material existence is at once consumed by the careful discharge of devotional service in Krishna consciousness. Well, that is the panacea, the solution to all our problems. That is to carefully discharge devotional service in Krishna consciousness. Then all the selfish desires and illusory concepts go away. A devotee in full Krishna consciousness appears superficially to be a great karmi, always working. But the inner significance of the devotee's activities is that they are meant for the satisfaction of the Supreme Lord. So that's what you would call the litmus test. Let's look that up. Litmus test. What does that mean? You can always test a person, let's say, uh, a person. Yes.
A test for acidity or alkalinity using litmus. A decisively indicative test.
All right. Now look at secondary definitions.
Don't show us one.
Huh?
Yeah, the second one, like
The second definition is the one.
Oh, I
The-
think this is decisively indicative test. Opposition to the nomination became became a litmus test for political support of candidates. Example.
The litmus test means that uh, okay, it has its the first definition is one thing, but the second definition is that there's a test to see whether someone's a real devotee or not a real devotee.
something that is used to make a judgment about whether someone or something is acceptable.
Yeah, so if someone is engaged in devotional service for sense gratification, then they fail the litmus test. Okay? But if they're engaged only to please Krishna, then they pass the litmus test. Okay, so litmus it's a type of paper, and yeah, go ahead.
Hare Krishna Maharaj.
Yeah,
If if there's a Krishna song and you really enjoy that song
yeah,
and you listen to it all the time,
yeah.
then is that sense gratification or is that
Well, who's singing?
some devotee?
And what is he singing? A bona fide song, or just a nice song that someone wrote that's very entertaining?
Some some song from Narottama Das, for example.
Some song of what?
Narottama Das?
Narottam Das. Well, Narottam Das Thakur is a pure devotee, so that there's nothing wrong with that. Yeah. If it's a nice song by some, movie star, that's nonsense. Doesn't pass the litmus test. Okay. So here it says that the living entity's conditional life of material existence is due to his desire to lord it over material nature, and due to his, well, what does it mean? The lord it over material nature. Well, it means that they want to they consider things belong to them, and then they try and collect as much wealth and opulence, houses, cars, vacations, all these things. So they are lording it over material nature. They want to use material nature for their sense gratification. They want to be the lords of the world. And there's a lot of people like that, right? Like, for example, the Assad family. For 50 years, the Assad family were kings of Syria, right? They lived in complete opulence, right? And they were uh, also uh, they also engaged in uh, torturing people. They had torture chambers. Anyone who didn't agree with them, they would torture them and kill them. And they killed a lot of their own people, right? Why? Well, it's because they wanted to be the controller and the enjoyer. So they got away with it for 50 years. Right? But now, finally, the people, decided, we got to get rid of these people. So the Assad family now has been debunked of its, let's say, privileges, and there's a new regime, and people don't know. And I mean, a lot of people are temporarily leaving Syria and waiting to see what the new, managers of the country are going to be like. Are they going to be like fanatical, uh, you know, people, or are they going to be actually good people? They don't know. You see, that's why the American system, in one sense, is good because it's almost impossible, according to the American political system, to become a dictator. There are always attempts. People like to become dictators, but the system is organized in such a way that you can be, the president of the United States only for 2 terms. Before they didn't have that, and then Roosevelt, he was elected 4 times, uh, and he would have been elected another 8. He would have been elected 8 times, but they put a stop to it and said you can only be elected the 2 times president of the United States. You know, and uh, Roosevelt got reelected over and over again. I think 4 times. Right. So there are these what you call uh, what's the right name of it? It's anyway. There are limitations on how many times you can be voted into a position, right? Otherwise, sometimes people are so good, or people are so charismatic that people would elect them, 10 times, But that's a bad for democracy. That's a bad example because a person could become corrupted being elected so many times. Okay, so all problems such as material contamination, the lusty behaviors, everything can be purified by devotional service. Because, why? The desire to lord it over material nature and the desire to become one with the Supreme Lord are absent in devotional service. We don't want to become the Supreme Lord. We know that our real position is to be the servant of the Lord. And to become one with the Lord? No. We always we understand that we are always subordinate to the Lord. So these two concepts, that is, to become one with the Lord or to lord it over material nature, are signs of people who are completely in illusion. And therefore, it says, therefore, the cause of material existence is that once consumed by the careful discharge of devotional service and Krishna consciousness. Well, what does it mean, careful discharge? That means you never come to the conclusion that you are God. You always understand that that's impossible. I'm always the servant of God. As soon as one wants to become God, then the whole idea of being the servant of God is corrupted. And one begins to have these false dreams of grandeur, and they want to live in opulence, and they want to exploit people. And anyone that doesn't agree with them, they want to kill them or put them in jail or torture them. So this was, you might think, well, this was always only never happens nowadays. What do you mean it doesn't happen today? He saw what just happened in Syria. The Assad family basically were tyrants for 50 years, controlling the people, controlling the wealth. controlling the politics and everything, and then finally now by a revolution, they've been debunked, they've been thrown out. So it's happening all the time. Now, the United States has a system of checks and balances. I want you to look that phrase up: checks and balances. The Constitution of the United States is full of checks and balances so that no one can become a dictator.
A system that prevents any branch of the US government from becoming too powerful by giving each branch the power to restrain the other. Power to restrain others.
Okay, you want to read that again, slower and much louder.
A system that prevents any one branch of the US government from becoming too powerful by giving each branch the power to restrain the others.
Yeah, so you have three, let's say, three uh, types of governance in the United States. Okay,
Legislative branch, executive branch, and judicial branch.
right. So that means there's checks and balances because you have those three branches of the government. And you have what's called, the Supreme Court, the final, let's say, decision that can be made. And after that, you can't, object to anything, and you cannot continue to object. Once the Supreme Court makes a final decision about something, that becomes the you know the the accepted uh, decision. You can't go beyond. You can't go beyond it. So therefore, you have these three parts of the governance in the United States. You have the Supreme Court, and you have what is it? What are the other two? And you have
The executive branch
executive branch, right,
and the legislative branch.
and the legislative. Yes. Okay. So that's for checks and balances. So there's at least the semblance of democracy and not a dictatorship. And it took let's say, the founding fathers of the Constitution of the United States, it took them some time to figure out all these things. If you read the Constitution of the United States, it's all about checks and balances, so nobody becomes a dictator. Even recently, uh, Franklin Delano Roosevelt was elected 4 times to be president of the United States. So that then they said no, you can only be elected twice, consecutively. So this checks and balances are important because if someone is elected over and over and over again, it could end up becoming a dictatorship. So you have these checks and balances in the Constitution of the United States to avoid having a dictatorship or a someone becoming like a king, right? Okay. So this is an interesting statement in the second paragraph of the verse today, text 23. It says, a devotee in full Krishna consciousness appears superficially to be a great karmi. Karmi means a sense gratifier. Always working, but the inner significance of the devotee's activities is that they are meant for the satisfaction of the Supreme Lord. This is called bhakti, or devotional service. And now the example. Arjuna was apparently a fighter, but when by his fighting he satisfied the senses of Lord Krishna, he became a devotee. Since A devotee also engages in philosophical research to understand the Supreme Person as he is. His activities may thus appear to be like those of a mental speculator, but actually he's trying to understand the spiritual nature and transcendental activities. Thus, although the tendency for philosophical speculation exists, the material effects of fruitive activities and empiric speculation, empiric means materialistic speculation, do not, because the activity is meant for the Supreme Personality of God. Okay, so to put this in simple language, everything depends on the motive of a person. What is the motive of the person? Is this person wanting to follow the rules and regulations of society, or is this person trying to, let's say, uh, change the rules of society and make themselves like a king? Right? So the so-called founding fathers of the Constitution of the United States wanted to avoid anyone becoming like a king. And that was the whole point why the people in America broke away from England, because England was ruling the American, uh, let's say, the Americas, because from a kingdom in England, and eventually the Americans, they revolted, although they were all Britishers basically. They had all come from England, and and then and basically they were following the King of England. But then uh, they started to say, um, uh, no. Let's see, what is it? What is that statement? No. Uh, uh, I forget what it is. Anyway, there was this. Their motto was uh, no representation without the no, I forget what it is. It's anyway, they got sick and tired of the king telling them what to do.
No taxation without.
Yeah, no taxation without representation. That's it. No taxation without representation. They got sick and tired of the King of England telling them what to do, basically. Although they were all Britishers originally, but then they revolted against England, and England and the British went to war with the American. Uh, who the American guys were all Britishers too, but uh, the Britishers, when in England, when they saw the Americans wanted to break away from being controlled by England, there was a revolution. There was a fight, and the fight went on. It wasn't finished in let's say when the Constitution of the United States was made. The fight went on until 1810, 18 up to 1820, right? When finally, Britain tries, stopped trying to conquer the new colonies. Even it went even farther than that. Uh, so the but eventually the new, let's say, new world people prevailed and developed the United States of America. You see, everything in this world, when things get corrupted, it's when people think that they can be the Lord of everything they see. So they try and be a controller. Let's look at a kidnapper, someone who kidnaps a woman or kidnaps a child. Well, what's the concept of the kidnapper? He wants to be the controller. So he might control a woman and put her in a dungeon or his basement with the door that's locked and take advantage of her. Why don't you look that up? There was uh, every let's say every time every time you look into the newspapers, you'll see there's some crazy guy that uh, uh, grabs a woman, puts her in his dungeon or his cellar, and exploits her. Right, and it could take the woman 20 years to get free of such a person, or 10 years, or whatever. Look that up. So this type of desire to be the controller and the enjoyer, that is the symptom of a karmi. The karmis want to be the controller and enjoyers. But the devotees, they wanted to be subordinate to the Lord and follow the instructions of the Lord without this false identity, false concept of being the owner and the enjoyer. The devotee does not accept proprietorship. The devotee understands that he's simply a servant of the Lord. See? Just like, and what is the system in Krishna consciousness? System is, okay, someone becomes president of the temple, but he doesn't own the temple, and he's not going to be president of the temple forever, right? He's simply a servant of the Prabhupada and the devotees, and he might be in that position for some time, but it's not like he's the king and now he makes his own rules. Right? He's got to follow the rules of Krishna consciousness. As soon as he deviates by engaging in illicit sex or by being abusive to devotees or whatever, immediately they get knocked out. You know, not immediately. Sometimes it can take a little while, but they'll get knocked out because that's completely opposite to what Prabhupada established as the culture of, let's say, ISKCON managers. ISKCON managers are supposed to all be servants of Prabhupada and the devotees. And as soon as they think, oh, I own this, this is my temple, this is my zone, or whatever, that it's no longer a zone, it's an ozone. It becomes, it's going to be a fight. And there were many fights like this before. Nowadays, it doesn't happen so much because, people become more serious about being Krishna conscious. Okay, so are there any questions? Okay, the main takeaway here is that there are two main, let's say, diseases. Karmis try to use the resources of material nature and thus become its lord and enjoy sense gratification. And the Gyanis, the salvationists, who have become frustrated in enjoying the material resources, want to become one with the Supreme Personality Godhead or merge into the impersonal effulgence. So, in other words, when you no longer can be king, then you want to become a Mayavadi and merge into uh, Krishna. So, and there are examples of this. Uh, there are definitely like there's sometimes these people who become very, very popular gurus. And then when they fall down, then they become what you would call a Mayavadi who renounces everything. Right? So they go from trying to control everything to renouncing everything. But both situations are not right, not correct. Obviously, it's clear you want to be the Lord of everything. That's wrong. But when you renounce everything, that means you also renounce Krishna. You say so. That's also a mistake. We don't. Devotee doesn't renounce everything. Devotee is realistic and understands that you don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. That's a saying in English. You bathe the baby in a basin, right? And uh, the then when you're finished, you throw the baby out with the bathwater. So that doesn't make any sense, right? So in the same way, uh, you don't make a fanatical decision because there was some disruption. Everything has to be balanced. So that's why you have checks and balances in the United States Constitution. And you have three uh, parts of the governance of the United States because that those are the checks and balances. So you have legislative part, you have executive part, and you have
Judicial.
yeah. So in this way, there's checks and balances. Okay. So it's an interesting statement here where it says a devotee in full Krishna consciousness appears superficially to be a great karmi, always working, but the inner significance of the devotee's activities is that they are meant for the satisfaction of the Supreme Lord. This is called bhakti or devotional service. Okay, so again, we're coming back to this point. Everything depends on the motive. If the motive is to serve Krishna and you're working day and night to do that, you're not a karmi. Just like karmis that work day and night to make money, to enjoy sense gratification, etc. But a devotee who's going to work day and night to serve Krishna, even though it might look like he's a karmi, but it is not. It's not the fact because his motive is to offer everything to Krishna, understanding that everything belongs to Krishna. Whereas the materialist, he believes that he can be a proprietor and own everything. And the devotee understands that Krishna is the proprietor, and he may work very hard, but he offers everything to Krishna without false concept of being the proprietor. Everything depends on this concept of proprietorship. And there's different types of proprietorship. There's communism, there's socialism, there's capitalism, etc. Right now, uh, why are these are different ways to organize society. Society is organized according to the principle of proprietorship. So you have capitalism, you have socialism, you have communism, and you have also nobody is the owner. There's chaos. So there's different principles of ownership that determine the way the society is going to be organized. Right. So all of those concepts, socialism, capitalism, communism, uh, are are actually wrong. Why? Because Krishna is the owner. Those principles are naming other things as being other persons or other organizations as being the owner. Right? Like if you're a capitalist or you're a communist or you're a what you would call a socialist. Yeah.
I checked here, Maharaj. You want me to read the different?
Yeah, go ahead. Go ahead.
So the proprietorship or ownership of property and resources is structured differently in various economic and political systems.
Right.
These differences reflect each system's philosophy on individual rights, resource distribution, and societal welfare.
Right.
Number one, capitalism. The core principle. Private ownership of property and resources is fundamental. Proprietorship is individuals and corporations own and control the property, businesses, and means of production. The profit motive drives innovation and economic activity. Markets determine the allocation of resources, prices, and wealth distribution. Advantages encourages competition, innovation, and economic growth. Critics can lead to income inequality and exploitation. Communism. The core principle, common ownership of resources and means of production.
By the way, there has never been a pure communist state. Why? Because when there's a when the communists overthrow, let's say, capitalists, there's a period of where you have to transform the society and the way it's working. But there's never been a pure transformation to communism. It always ends up with a dictatorship. You know.
Because the few people that oversee, they become the.
Yeah, they become corrupted by the power. Go ahead.
Yeah, in case of communism, the proprietorship principles, all property, including businesses and resources, are collectively owned by the community or the state.
It's
Private
never really happened. There's been attempts to do that, but it's never really purely happened. Go ahead.
private ownership is virtually eliminated. The state manages resources on behalf of the people. Distribution of goods and services is based on need and not market dynamics. Now, advantages aims for equality and elimination of class divisions. Critique.
That never happened also.
Mhm.
It's been attempted, but it's never really happened. Go ahead.
On the opposite side, it often leads to inefficiency, lack of innovation, and authoritarian governance.
Exactly.
Socialism. The core principle is public or collective ownership combined with private ownership in specific areas. Proprietorship. Key industries such as healthcare, utilities, transportation are publicly owned and heavily regulated. Individuals can own private property and businesses, but wealth distribution is moderated through taxes and welfare.
So that's socialism.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Emphasis on reducing inequality while maintaining some market mechanism. Advantages balances equity with individual freedom. Critics risk of bureaucratic inefficiency and potential disincentive for hard work.
That's the system that we have now. Although we're supposed to be a capitalist country, it's morphed or it's changed into a socialist type of
Yeah, that's
system now. Not complete socialism, but
elements.
yeah, a lot of elements of it. Yeah.
Then there are other types like feudalism. Core principle ownership is concentrated in the hands of the ruling elite. Under proprietorship, the land is owned by monarchs or nobles and granted to vassals in exchange for service or rent. Peasants work the land but have no ownership rights. Advantages provide social order in medieval times. Critics inefficient and exploitative with no upward mobility for the majority.
Yeah. In other words, people don't really work hard because they can't advance. The king or the nobles get all the money, and the serfs, they just work hard. That's basically, they just get the minimum food and so forth. So it's not a very good system.
Then there is next type, which is fascism. core principle, centralized control of the economy while allowing nominal private ownership. Property remains under
Okay,
private.
there's a major point here. These different types of societies are based on the concept of ownership. So you have capitalism, you have socialism, you have communism, you have this, you have that. The type of society that you live in is determined by its, let's say, um, philosophy of ownership. Go ahead.
Yeah, then the fascism means the property remains under private ownership, but the state exerts significant control over how it is used. Business owners must align with state goals and policies. Advantages claims to promote national unity and strength. Critics restricts freedoms and often leads to oppression. Mixed economy. It's a combination of capitalist and socialist principles.
That's the United States.
Private ownership is prevalent, but the government intervenes to regulate markets and ensure social welfare. Public ownership exists in areas deemed essential, example, education, healthcare, and so on. Advantages, flexibility to adapt to changing societal needs. Critics, balancing private incentives with public needs can be challenging. Anarchism,
Nobody is the owner.
abolition of hierarchical structures, including centralized ownership. Property is communally managed without formal state control. Emphasis on voluntary cooperation and mutual aid.
That never works.
Mm.
It works in the beginning, but then it morphs into something nonsense.
Aspires to complete freedom and equality. Lack of structures can lead to chaos and inefficiency.
Yeah. Now, why did the communist, let's say, model collapse? It was working for about 70, 80 years, and then the whole thing collapsed. Why is that? Because there is no incentive for the normal person to advance in that societal organization. They were sort of stuck, you know. And also it wasn't actually pure communism. The transformation from capitalism to communism never actually took place. There were still, rich people and poor people. There was a little bit more, social services and things like that, but there was still a ruler class and the people that were just normal workers. The whole thing of communism is that the workers are the owners, right? But it never really happened because you have to have a time where a period where you're transforming the society, right? But what happened is that there were uh, people who wanted to control. So this is why the Soviet Union collapsed, because they never actually transformed into pure communism. They had a type of socialism. So what is the difference between communism and socialism? Socialism is somewhat democratic. Communism is autocratic. Right? You have people who are, in charge of everything, but it's not exactly the people; it's the state that is in charge of everything in communism. The state owns everything. People don't own anything. In socialism, you have regulated ownership. In capitalism, you have wildcat ownership. Someone can become very, very rich, and other people can be very poor in capitalism. So the concept of proprietorship determines the type of type of uh, society that you have. So, what is the correct ownership? Krishna is the ownership of everything. All the other things, the communist, the socialist, this thing, that thing, they're all wrong. The actual, real, basic, let's say, philosophy of the organization of society is Krishna consciousness. Now, what is Krishna consciousness? Well, Krishna is the owner of everything. No human being is the owner of everything. Krishna is the owner of everything. So people work cooperatively to please Krishna. Now, has there ever been a system of governments where Krishna is the owner of everything? Yes, there has been. There has been.
Judge Sirino.
Who's that?
Sirino.
Stop recapping.
You're
The elephant in the room.
well, no, this was an ant in the elephant in the room is much more significant. Okay, so are there any questions?
I think you were speaking about, has there ever been a kind of society with Krishna?
It is still.
Yeah, you go. Oh, go ahead. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a similar question. When during the ruling of Yudhishthira or
Yeah.
Parashit Maharaj.
Yeah.
And even that had downfall, right? Guru Maharaj, why did it fall down? Like, can it really be re-established in Kali Yuga at all? Unless Krishna comes as Kalki and re-establish.
Well, things like that happen because of people who want to control, and there's a fight. Why did communism fail? Because they were always fighting who was going to be the president or the head of the committee, right? Because that communism failed. And also, when you have a society like the hippies, they were having a society which no one is the owner. That also failed. In other words, no one was the owner of the children, no one was the owner of the properties and things like that. So all those hippie communes that took place, in the 1960s, most of them failed. Are there any today? No, there were a lot of communes in the 1960s, but most of them failed. There might be one or two that are still going on today in the United States, but and then you have the crazy guys like Jim Jones and others that become dictators. But there's never been this pure communistic concept where the people are the owners. There has been experiments where nobody is the owner, right? But that's very chaotic. The example of the people are the owners. Well, then you have committees, and then sometimes there's arguments that take place that can't be resolved. So then it fails. So that's what happens to That's what happened to the hippies. They were, their point was nobody's the owner. Everything is, the property of the members of their group. But it eventually failed. See any hippies today? Hippie communes? Very few. There used to be a lot, but they all failed. And they were all arguing in the end. Okay. So what is the best organization of society? This has been going on since the beginning of time to find out what is the ideal society. Many books have been written about this. The concept of an ideal society. Well, Prabhupada, he organized Krishna consciousness to be an ideal society, right? So you have checks and balances in Krishna consciousness, but to become a leader, you have to follow regulative principles in Krishna consciousness. To become a leader in normal society, you don't have to become, a person who is, doesn't eat meat, doesn't gamble, doesn't have illicit sex. A lot of the rulers in normal societies, they're meat eaters, they're gamblers,
They do all the four.
they do all four and get away with it. So in Krishna consciousness, to be a leader, you have to follow the regulative principles. And as soon as you deviate, then you lose your position. So this is a better, what you would call model for societal organization. It's meritorious. You have to have the merit of being a good devotee in order to be a good manager. Now, sometimes people are good devotees, but they're not good managers, right? So, therefore, they should not try and be something that they're not. But if you're a good devotee and you're a good manager, then that's the ideal thing. That's what Prabhupada wanted. And you're not a dictator either. But there isn't, you don't have elections. Prabhupada was not in favor of having, frequent elections of who's going to be the president of a temple. As long as the president was following all the rules, regulations, Prabhupada was satisfied with that, and he could continue the rest of his life being in that position. But there is always the possibility. There were very good managers, but sometimes they got involved in illicit sex and things like that, and they fell down. So, but Prabhupada was not. He didn't support election. So, uh, and maybe in some types of extreme situations, he might have said make a committee, but normally he liked to have a temple president for life, as long as he was doing the right things and that devotees were happy. Everything was more or less decided on whether the devotees are happy and cooperating, and there's no argument going on. That means you have a good manager. So why should you get rid of a good manager? That was Prabhupada's point. If someone is following the rules and regulations, and people are satisfied by the governance of that person who's also following Prabhupada's program, then why get rid of that person? Or why subject that person to elections? Okay.
There is a question raised by, I think, a hand raised by Sanatan Prabhu. Go ahead, Prabhu.
Hare Krishna Guru Maharaj. Please accept my humble obeisances.
Very cool.
Maharaj, I have a question related to the second paragraph where the devotee might look like a karmi, but actually he is doing all his work towards the satisfaction of the Supreme Lord that comes into the spiritual form of uh, correcting himself uh, and helping the senses satisfy the senses of Supreme Lord. So, in that regard, Maharaj, if suppose any devotee is really helping in the uh, spreading the Krishna consciousness, or he's using all his uh, properties or something, towards the Krishna, but he's not leaving them, but he's using all his properties or other things towards in spreading the Krishna consciousness or spiritual thing. Will it come under like a pure devotion, Maharaj, or as he's still attached to those properties or something, it considered as different?
Well, rich people, they will control their wealth, but they'll do, uh, social services things. They'll be generous. They'll give donations, things like that. Uh, but a devotee understands that everything belongs to Krishna. Nothing belongs to them. So a devotee can work really hard, but he'll dedicate everything for spreading Krishna consciousness. Now, is he going to dedicate everything in a collegiate way, where his money goes to a group of people who are managing temple? Or does he keep his money and spend it the way he thinks it should be spent for Krishna consciousness? There's the question there. How is he going to use his money? Is he going to give it to the managers of the temple so that it can be used for managing the temple? Or is he going to uh, make donations according to who he thinks deserves it? So ultimately, everything belongs to Krishna. So uh, one should have, hopefully, good managers of the temple, so there's no question that the money that's being given to the temple is misused. If it's not being misused, everyone's satisfied. If it's being misused, there's a disconnect right there. So, and why would the money that is coming into the temple be misused? Well, the people who are controlling the finances of the temple were not using the money correctly or for the best benefit of the community. So then there's arguments that would arise in a situation like that. Well, when you have good managers and no one is greedy and all the money is being used correctly in the service of Krishna, nobody has any argument. Everything depends on uh, pure devotional service, where one never forgets that everything belongs to Krishna and never in sees himself as the owner and controller of things. We are all servants of Krishna. Nobody is the owner. No one is the proprietor, and but yet we manage things correctly according to Prabhupada's instructions. So then there's no problem. As soon as somebody thinks that they own something, then it becomes problematic. Sometimes people say, well, you have to own your service, right? Well, what does that mean? Well, that means that you're very serious about doing your service, but it doesn't mean that you have proprietorship of that position. It just means that you are very diligent in doing your responsibilities. So the whole concept of ownership, there are many different concepts of it, and each concept has a type of principles of ownership. There's capitalism, there's communism, there's socialism, and so forth. Every one of those concepts are wrong. Then what is the right concept? The right concept is Krishna is the owner, and we are all servants of the Lord. So therefore, we don't live extravagantly. We live comfortably, but not extravagantly, so that we can donate to the temple, and that the temple programs and the temple buildings and the temple maintenance go on nicely. If nobody donates to the temple, how can you maintain the temple, right? So you have to be generous to understand your position as a devotee. If you hoard money, then that's actually sinful, hoarding money. If you use the money in Krishna consciousness, that is the right thing to do. But still, you have a right to have an emergency account to protect your family in case of an emergency. So usually it comes down to like 10% of whatever usually Prabhupada was always saying 50%, but usually it comes down to like 10% of your income should go to the temple. Now, you can give more also, but a lot of devotees, they might not have, a big job or something, so they can afford 10%. But normally, Prabhupada gave the rule, normally it should be 50% of your income should go to the temple. Okay, any question?
So I asked ChatGPT.
The elephant.
The elephant.
The elephant in
What
the
are the
room.
what are the elements of Krishna consciousness which ensure that such a society works properly, and what are the checks and balances?
Yeah.
Like just to summarize what you've been sharing. And then so it said, first of all, Krishna consciousness systems of checks and balances are not rooted in the material or legal structures, but in the spiritual principles and practices designed to align individuals and communities with divine law or dharma.
I don't understand that. Say that again.
Because there are no legal structure, but it's based on the spiritual principles and practices designed to align individuals and communities with the divine law or dharma, Krishna, with Krishna's laws.
Divine law of?
Divine law are called dharma.
Yeah.
So first element is divine ownership, or Ishavashyam Idam Sarvam principle. So the core idea is everything belongs to
Vaisham idam sarvam. Go ahead.
Everything belongs to Krishna. Individuals are caretakers and not proprietors. Effect: it eliminates greed, hoarding, and exploitation by encouraging detachment and proper use of resources. Check: misuse of resources or exploitation is addressed through spiritual education and the guidance of the gurus and senior devotees. Leadership through Guru, Sadhu, and Shastra. Guru, the spiritual master, provides personal guidance to help individuals to follow Krishna's teaching. Sadhu, association with saintly devotees ensures collective spiritual focus and accountability. Shastra, sacred scriptures like Bhagavad Gita and Srimad Bhagavatam act as the ultimate authority, providing clear principles for ethical and moral behavior. Checks: leaders are held accountable by the scriptures and spiritual communities. The community is encouraged to question and correct leadership if it deviates from the principles. Then the Varnashrama Dharma, societal structure. Society is organized into 4 occupational divisions, Varna, and 4 stages of life, Ashrama, based on individuals' tendencies and spiritual progress. Varnas, Brahmanas, Kshatriyas, Vaishyas, and Shudras. Ashramas are in brahmacharya, grihastha, vanaprastha, and sannyasa. The effect encourages everyone to contribute according to their abilities and responsibilities, fostering balance and harmony. Checks. Leaders, brahmanas and kshatriyas are expected to serve selflessly and act as role models. Spiritual training ensures that individuals in every role work for collective benefit, not personal gain. Yajna, which means like sacrifice or service. Core idea, sacrificial acts are central, emphasizing service to Krishna and society. Effect promotes selflessness, cooperation, and spiritual unity. Check. Rituals and sacrifices are conducted transparently and according to scriptural guidelines, ensuring no manipulation. Bhakti practices. The core practices chanting the holy names of the Lord Krishna, Hare Krishna Mahamantra, regular study of scriptures like Bhagavad Gita, deity worship in temples, which fosters a central focus for the community. The effect creates spiritual accountability and purifies individuals, reducing selfish tendencies. Check. Deviations in personal practices are addressed through spiritual counseling and community support. Then the next principle is association, satsanga. Core idea. Devotees are encouraged to associate with spiritually advanced individuals to reinforce good behavior and correct mistakes. Effect. A community of devotees provides support, encouragement, and gentle correction. Check. The collective nature of the devotional life ensures individual actions are constantly aligned with spiritual principles. The next principle is the distribution of resources. Resources are distributed equitably based on need and spiritual purpose. This reduces materialism and focuses resources on spiritual upliftment, such as prasadam distribution, temple construction, etc. Check. Transparent management of resources under the guidance of spiritual leaders ensures balance according to the principles. Then next principle is kirtan and sankirtan. Collective chanting and outreach activities keep individuals spiritually centered and socially connected. This promotes unity, dissolves conflicts, and spreads Krishna consciousness. Regular participation in these activities ensures alignment with Krishna's teaching. Then the next principle is the principle of regulation, self-regulation. The core regulative principles like no meat eating, no intoxication, no gambling, no illicit sex ensures individuals live disciplined lives focused on spiritual growth. Community and spiritual leaders provide guidance to help individuals uphold these principles. The next principle is accountability through humility and correction. True devotees practice humility, are open to correction, and strive to align their actions with Krishna's will. This eliminates ego-driven power dynamics and fosters mutual respect. Senior devotees and community leaders correct deviations lovingly and ensuring accountability. So essentially, the checks and balances are spiritual authorities. Scriptures are the ultimate arbiter of disputes and deviations. Guru-disciple relationship. Disciples are accountable to their gurus to ensure spiritual progress. Community oversight. Devotees collectively observe and encourage proper behavior in the community. Then divine oversight. Krishna is seen as the supreme judge and encouraging individuals to act with integrity, knowing they're accountable to him. So,
Okay. So are there any questions? So the problem there are two problems here. There's desire to lord it over material nature and the desire to become one with the Supreme Lord. Both those desires should be absent in Krishna consciousness. We should be satisfied with being the servant of the Lord, and we should not fancy ourselves becoming the Lord. So, therefore, it says the cause of material existence is that once consumed, meaning purified, by the careful discharge of devotional service in Krishna's service. Okay, so our devotional service should be in Krishna's, it should be in Krishna's consciousness. In other words, everything belongs to Krishna, nothing belongs to me. And everything should be used in the service of Krishna. There should not be any selfishness and holding back. So the generosity of the devotees is important for the maintenance of Krishna consciousness. So somebody's got to be generous, otherwise, everyone will have to like work like karmis to make money. But if everyone gives naturally a certain percentage of their income to the temple, then the temple doesn't have a problem being maintained. So a good temple is one where there's no arguing, there's no politics, and everyone is happy.
Cooperating.
Yeah, and cooperating, yeah. That way you have a good temple. Haribol.
Very good. Any other questions online or comments?
Okay, so our takeaway is a devotee in full Krishna consciousness appears superficially to be a great karmi, always working. But the inner significance of the devotee's activities is that they are meant for the satisfaction of the Supreme Lord. This is called bhakti, or devotional service. Arjuna was apparently a fighter, but when, by his fighting, he satisfied the senses of Lord Krishna, he became a devotee. Since a devotee always engages in philosophical research to understand the Supreme Person, excuse me, he always engages in philosophical research to understand the Supreme Person as he, meaning the Lord, is. His activities may thus appear to be like those of a mental speculator, but actually he's trying to understand the spiritual nature and transcendental activities. Thus, although the tendency for philosophical speculation exists, the material effects of fruitive activities and empiric speculation do not, because the activity is meant for the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So, everything depends on who we are serving. Are we serving our own sense gratification, or are we serving the deities in the temple and the instructions of bona fide gurus? So, and that's going to determine if one is actually a devotee in good standing. They will never make a major decision without getting the advice of the guru or gurus. And they always understand that I am not the proprietor. Therefore, they're generous in supporting the temple. and always being happy to live a simple life. In other words, simple living, high thinking. If one is always searching to be opulent and enjoying sense gratification, that is a mistake. The life of a devotee should be the life of a minimalist. They might be making millions of dollars, but they're living very simply and not flaunting their opulence. And they're being very generous. Why? Because everything belongs to Krishna. If you think everything belongs to me, then you become corrupted by the possession of things. But in the case of a person who understands everything belongs to Krishna, there's no limit to what Krishna will bless that devotee, uh, because Krishna knows that the devotee will use all that income and opulence in the service of the Lord. So the more you give, the more you get. That's a general rule in the spiritual life. The more you give, the more you get. And why do you get things? Because Krishna knows you're using it properly. Haribol. Okay, so 8 o'clock. So Merry Christmas.
Yes,
Haribol. Merry Christmas. We are Krishnases.